Hey, welcome to the Lowdown. As usual, Eric and I are here, and today we're super stoked. We've got Tim Seisser of Lowdown Bass Guitars, which no relation to the Lowdown podcast, but hey, great
Only
minds.
today. Only
Gets,
today.
That's right.
well, super pleased to have you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Of course, my pleasure. I was stoked to see that you guys were doing this and to be asked to be a part of it. So thank you.
So now, Tim, where are you from?
I was born in Elgin, Illinois. I was raised in Arlington Heights, so northwest suburbs of Chicago.
Yeah.
And I've lived in Chicago now for about 15 years. I call myself a Chicagoan. It used to be kind of dicey because you go to different places and people say, oh, I'm from Chicago. And people go, oh, what part? And you say Arlington Heights. And they're like, shut the hell up. You're not from Chicago. So, but now I feel like I can claim it, like I'm a property owner. I'm a business owner in the city. My wife's a business owner in the city. So it's just like, yeah, Chicago.
How'd you just start making basses? Like, what made you think one day, like, geez, I think I want to make basses?
I think it's always kind of been there. I was always very hands-on. I would always change my own strings. I like kind of figured out how to do some very basic setup stuff early on, just with a little bit of resources that were available then, like which was a lot of Bass Player magazine and just kind of like videos, like instructional videos. Sometimes people would kind of delve into that kind of stuff. So I would piece together a little bit there. And then as I was starting to make a go of it as a musician without any other job, I was like, what else can I do to kind of scrap up some extra dollars here and there, especially in the winter, because everything stops here in the winter. It's just kind of like the scene just disappears. So I was like, well, I'll do some repair work. And then I started doing like just a few little things. Like I tried to epoxy a fretless that I had and it was impossible. It was a disaster. And like I tried to like work on a parts build. It didn't come out very good. I tried to make a pick guard. It didn't come out very good. So I gave up. And then I kind of just started gigging coincidentally and forgot about it. And then played full time as a player for probably like 5 years, 6 years after that. And then I just kind of started buying a lot of gear because I started to be able to have some money from playing enough gigs to like pay the rent and buy gear. And that kind of just led to me purchasing some things on Talkbase that were just kind of like I didn't need, but I was like, this looks cool. One was like a Warmouth build that some guy just did a horrible job with, and I'm like, it was like $300, and it was gorgeous Koa top and back, and it was a cool jazz bass. So I bought that and ended up I was playing Cliff Bordwell custom instruments back then. So that was my introduction to the custom bass world. Was I just loved his designs, and I became in the market for a nice instrument, and I discovered that and kind of got introduced to the whole vibe of like exotic woods and single cut designs and like contemporary pickups and preamp combinations, like the whole vibe. And that's, I kind of like, unfortunately there was an instrument where I had an issue with the truss rod, and that led me to meet a gentleman named Carl Pedigo, who is known as the Chicago Bass Doctor. And he was the Lakeland shop manager in the 90s.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So he was like kind of the head honcho there. And then there was kind of like some odd stuff that happened with the company, and so he kind of got let go. And then the Piricello brothers bought Lakeland and hired him back because everyone was like, he's an OG, he's a badass. Right. And so I went to him for this truss rod issue, and then also had this Warmouth bass, and which I wasn't doing anything with. And I was like, hey, do you do like apprenticeships? And he was like, no. It's like, oh, okay. And then
sounds like a soft yes to me.
Yeah, it was like, no. And so I was like, all right. I mean, I understand, like, dude is super busy. He's like one of the go-to repair guys in Chicago. There's like a handful of dudes that all the players take their instruments to. So, and there's a lot of bass players in this general urban area. So, so I was like, well, how about this? I got this bass and I want to kind of soup it up. And I kind of wanted to Lakeland-ify it anyway, like put a humbucker in the bridge and just kind of like put a jazz neck on it instead of the kind of more P profile neck. So it seemed like the right thing. I was like, I'll just pay you what you would charge me to do this work anyway as a customer, but like, let me observe you doing the work. And he's like, okay, that's cool. And so we just kind of started doing sessions on Saturdays. I would go over there at like 10:30 in the morning, usually like kind of hungover, or like after getting home from a late gig at like 2 in the morning. And he would usually just going to be kind of like curmudgeon-y because it was early in the end of the week.
That's curmudgeonly.
Yeah. And so it was a vibe. Sometimes it was like, I was like, does this guy really want me around here? Like, I'd be asking stupid questions and like, I don't know.
How old were you when you were doing that?
I was like 30. It was kind of like I started to get a little burnt out on the music industry because I was hustling super hard, playing like 200 plus gigs a year, and trying to get on to the next level, kind of like touring syndicate stuff in my late 20s. And then I got married, and then I just kind of got burnt out. I was playing a lot of weddings, I was playing a lot of corporate events, and I was just kind of like my artistic soul was sucked out. But Carl was also a very sympathetic person in that regard because he's a musician, but chose that path as a profession. And he's into all sorts of like weird, cool music and very like non-traditional stuff. And he's a guitar player primarily, but he's like the guy for like fret leveling in Chicago on basses. So he's kind of an enigma. In his own right. So we kind of, I kind of like, he was a bit of my shoulder to cry on too, because I was just like, I don't want to be a musician anymore. I want to do something else. And he was kind of like, at times was like, I don't know if you really want to do this because you're a really good musician. Are you sure about it? But he would also kind of be like, yeah, the music business is shitty. It sucks. Like, you know, it's rough on people who are artistically extremely gifted, but don't have the business sense together and just get lost in the shuffle. So that was kind of what, I mean, eventually it was just like the whole thing evolved. He went from showing me how to carve a nut to how to do fret leveling, to how to route a bigger pickup cavity, to how to, you know, drill tuner holes, like all the kind of just what essentially ends up being like the back end work of building an instrument. That was like my whole first year or 2 years with Carl. And then like pretty much what happened was I was playing these boardwells. I had one with a low B and I had one with a high C. I was playing fives, and I loved both these instruments, but I couldn't stand not having a low B, and then I couldn't stand not having the high C. So I was like, I need a six. Like it was just where I was going musically. I need a 6-string bass. And so I started speccing them out with like Cliff, and started looking at maybe doing like a hybrid situation with like a Conklin neck, or I'm sorry, yeah, Carvin neck, and like a slab body that I did, or, you know, just some sort of hybrid thing to save money. And nobody had the spec I wanted really, other than fully custom, and all that stuff was looking like $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. And so I was like, if I'm going to spend that money, I'm just going to spend it on wood and pickups and hardware. And that's kind of how I discovered Best Bass Gear, was when it came time to order pots and capacitors and heat shrink and you know, strap buttons and 9-volt battery boxes and just like all of the stuff.
All of the stuff. That's right.
Yeah. And yeah, I bought enough. I was there this afternoon. I have an exceptional lumberyard in Des Plaines. It's called Owl Hardwood. And the first time I went in there, Carl told me to go, because I was like, listen, man, I'm going to do this. I'm going to build a bass. I want to build a 6 for myself to play. And, you know, so I go to Owl, and he'd always show me his finds from there. He'd be like, check out this bird's eye I got at Owl. You know, like, look at this board. Isn't this insane? And he was like, it was like in the back of a stack, and it was only like $50. And so, yeah, I went, and I was just like, what the hell is this place? Everything just like says like 5/4 and has a price next to it. And all the wood names are abbreviated, and there's just stacks of boards. Yeah. So there's a guy that works there. I'm embarrassed I don't know his last name, but his name is Kurt, and he's actually a luthier. And he just happened to bump into me when I was walking around aimlessly, and was like, what are you trying to build? I was like, a guitar. And he's like, oh, and then that was it. I was in there for like 2 hours with him, and he just took me up and down the stacks and was like, I've used this before. This is cool. This you could try, but if you're going to make a neck out of it, you got to be careful how hard you dig in, like, and just kind of showed me the ropes. And I left with way too much wood, and one 6-string for myself turned into 6 basses. And that was the beginning of the end, as it were.
So like most of us, you became a builder just to justify your wood hoarding addiction. Kind of like...
so like I was I was thinking about that when I was walking in there today, because I always just like look for cool little pieces. Like they have a lot of like kind of like I think from just the milling process and what they sell the most of, they have a lot of cool like 1/4 inch cutoffs a lot.
Yeah, yeah, that
And
makes sense.
so you can find some really cool stuff for like tops or fingerboards, but it's a total crapshoot because that stuff isn't always milled up to where it's available. Like sometimes they'll have like flamed ebony, and there'll be like 30 boards, 30 1/4 inch boards that are exact fingerboard size sitting in a box. And like, and the next time you go there a couple weeks later, it's all gone because someone found out and came in and bought it up.
Oh, naturally, yeah.
Yeah.
I was just kind of thinking how cool it is that you basically turned what was sort of as an unfortunate uh, truss rod situation into basically befriending this kind of guitar guru guy curmudgeon who basically took a shine to you because you have a good personality and apparently have some perseverance too, and just kind of like showed you everything. I think that's so cool.
Yeah. It got to the point where I kind of felt like I was annoying him a little bit.
It's a
Because
generational thing. That's all it is.
I mean, when you start talking about like making stuff from scratch, like you're getting into some pretty, like you need some machinery. And Lakeland has all
Yeah.
that stuff in the basement. And I was kind of like, can you help me cut these strips and laminate this neck, please? And so those sessions kind of like, I mean, that stuff's a lot more work, and it was super
Yeah.
dangerous for me as someone who's never used those tools before. So he had to do it. That's the only way I observed, and he coached me, but. I never for liability reasons, if nothing else. I never was like using that machinery. But that was a big challenge because after the first batch, one of the hardest things for me, and this is why I don't think I am like a wood storage person, is I didn't have the space to store stuff. Living in a city, it's like,
Yeah.
Yeah, just the logistical difficulties of having a space are and the cost associated with literally just a room in a shit building. It's like so I was lucky because between Owl and between sourcing stuff online from the multiple luthier wood specific places that are now available and easily accessible, I don't really have to store much of anything other than neck blanks. I keep a lot of like, if I'm going to make, if like, because of my workflow, like I'm working on a batch that'll probably start in June. I probably will start tackling the necks in earnest as far as like ripping wood away and starting to change the shape like later in the fall. So I try to get everything in the shop acclimating by like the spring at least, if not a year ahead or so.
Yeah.
And they're doing, I mean, the lumberyard they're great. So I know they do a good job of taking care of their stuff. And I mean, as much as a lumberyard can, I guess, but it's just, I trust them, and I trust their selection, and I trust their process. I mean, wood is wood. So I've gotten stuff from them that probably wasn't dried out enough and cracked after I glued it up. That stuff happens. I've gotten stuff that's cupped after, like, especially the thin stock, that's the flip side of buying that stuff when it's that thin, is sometimes when you go to chop it up, it just goes whoop and cups.
So walk me through this one. So I'm looking at your website, and here at Lowdown Bass Guitars, and I'm trying to, like, I'm just going through all the different items, and all the different pieces, and I'm just kind of like, this is pretty amazing. You spend a ton of time going through and laying out stories, laying out sort of, what you've been working on, and also some of the picks. Do you have anything that's specifically that you're particularly proud of that we should look at?
Generally, all of the good bass porn is in the sold sections.
Well, naturally, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So that's usually that's kind of like a lot of the stuff that I end up having available as stock is available because I've chosen to make stuff with extra wood or parts or whatever. So or like leftover cutoffs from a customer's instrument. So oftentimes the stock builds end up kind of being a little, I mean, I've done some fun stock builds, but the customer builds is where you really can start to get into some crazy stuff, because they're sort of dictating the direction of the build, or I'm dictating to them what I think the best choices are. And there's like with some people, there's no limit. They want an instrument and they know what my price point is and how I fit into their budget. And so there's nothing I'm going to really top out. And so that can be fun because you can go really crazy with options and stuff.
Do you find that happens a lot where you're guiding them through the decision-making process?
I found it's such a, there's no trend in my clientele whatsoever. It's just each instrument is just a unique build, no matter kind of like what the scenario is. So it's a little more like the sky's the limit within the confines of what I think is acceptable as the person who's like going to be slapping a name on this. One of my biggest influences, who I had the chance to meet actually at a solo bass competition I performed in New York for Phil Jones, is Michael Tobias. And I just, everything about their instruments and their brand, I just absolutely love. I love their sort of unwillingness to do people's crazy ideas, because the thing is it's like, I kind of think of it in regards to music as well, where like, you know, people can get popular despite being like competent musically. But there's the masters are the masters, and the respect is there no matter what. And I feel like sometimes when the customer tries to dictate too much exactly what they want in the instrument, you end up losing the benefit of having a luthier who was a professional musician or has worked closely with elite level performing musicians and touring musicians, and understands from a real world standpoint what a gigging working bass player needs in order to bring out their ability to create music at the highest level possible. And ergonomics come into play, and you know how you want to put your personal stamp comes into play. But I just love the fact that it's like they do everything from just like crazy beautiful boutique woods to just like a swamp ash body and a maple neck and a bird's eye fingerboard, and it's all equally beautiful and amazingly executed. And yeah, I mean, and when you meet them and when you talk to them and when you get into sort of a little bit of their world and how they function living out in the woods, you know, and working essentially at the house in the garage, but it's like a little team, and they have a process, and their finished work is amazing, and just it's the whole package. And when you see people playing their instruments, you know, it's sort of like Fodera in a sense too, where anybody can afford to buy these instruments, but there's something about the people that choose to play these instruments of just being oftentimes at a very elite level that, you know, there's a connection there with the quality of the instrument and the build, and also the quality of the musicianship or the player, not just technique, but from just a professional musician like standpoint, or like a sound standpoint. So I mean, I always kind of explain to people, when you break down what I'm doing, it's kind of like I'm just making jazz basses. You know, it does not look like that oftentimes, but from where and I've talked to my good friend Jake Sarek of Sarek Basses, who is just also an incredible businessman and luthier, and you know, we have very high level of respect for each other's products, but our products are nothing like one another. And I think that's probably part of the reason why we get along so well. But I think he's sort of like, he's self-professed to me like, oh, I'm like coming at it from a Rickenbacker point of view. Like that to me is like, that's my bass. And I'm like, for me, probably just because I grew up with it and I love Jocko and the music I played and my function as a professional musician in the scene that I was working in, I love jazz bass. So that to me is like the optimal instrument, is essentially is like a jazz bass. And also because I apprenticed with Lakeland, you know, there's that's a very tangible print on my style as well, and how I approach my builds. So I've always sort of been of the mind of trying to marry like my love of exotic woods and the beauty of nature, and being able to use it in a way that just complements your design, and also like it not being a sterile, scooped, dead, heavy 35-inch long, you know, kind of like impossible to play thing, or you know, the horn comes out to the 15th fret and it just wants to go derp every time you put it on your lap, you know. So it was always kind of like trying to find a happy marriage of the stuff that I liked as a consumer of instruments, and also so like as a someone who was using these instruments as a tool in order to make a living regularly. So
Yeah, I mean, like this bass particularly, like it looks like it'd be very well balanced. I mean, just to me, looking at it from a design perspective, it looks like something you would just put on and it would just stay put where it's supposed to be. And
yeah, if you flip through, there's like a sequence of photos following this. If you just flip through the thumbnails following this, you'll see this bass is representative of another sort of policy of mine as a business owner, which is like I try to waste as little bit as possible. So a lot of times in the early days of the business, my overhead was so low, I was trying to make stock to sell to sort of like boost nobody's going to buy instruments from someone who's only built 3 instruments. And there's no proof that they've built instruments online, and there's no testimonials from people that have played these instruments to be like they're actually cool. But I just, I would take a lot of times with just how that works out with the lumberyard, I'd get enough to make a book match body blank, and there'd be a little piece left over that on its own wasn't wide enough to build a body with. It needed a mate to book match with, but I ran out of that wood. So what I would do is I would take the 3/4 inch cutoff wood from my neck blanks and then just side stripe onto the side. So what essentially would be garbage wood then becomes repurposed, and then that blank would sort of go through the thickness sander, and then from there it would be a body blank, which eventually, all that wood would just be like cutoff wood.
But it looks wicked cool though, because when you have the contouring on the side of the instrument, and you can see where the contrasting wood kind of comes through. In a way, it's kind of like, it reminds you like a little bit of like a Carl Thompson kind of thing.
Absolutely.
But also I think of like Rickenbacker headstocks, where you have like the maple going through the center, and you have the walnut wings, that sort of thing. But it's like you're taking that and like kind of but doing a very different thing with it, where it's cool in that something that it seems like it's born out of conservation actually ends up looking incredibly artistic and intentional, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, one of the first instruments I sort of took that approach on was when I kind of decided to make it a business and really start to push the fact that I was building these instruments. I had a lot of cool opportunities very early on, completely unintentionally, probably just solely based on the fact that I was a working musician and I had a network of other bass players with very easy access to. But also I was trying to be proactive from like a networking point of view from other people in the city that were doing these sort of things, and how I could work with them to do little mini showcases or like do shows together and split the cost of a booth, or whatever, just any way to kind of to expand the brand. So I ended up hitting up Michael Arnapol of MAS Soundworks, who builds speaker cabinets and was building all these crazy designs. And he ended up taking one of my instruments to Summer NAMM just because he liked what I was doing. So I was like, yeah, if you want to take him and set him up in the booth. He took a fretless 5 and then a fretted 5. And he came back and he was like, man, like there was a lot of good feedback about your instruments. And I was like, oh, cool. So then we actually ended up going out to Winter NAMM together, 6 months later. And one of the instruments where I had done that sort of conservation approach of like laminating all sorts of stuff and kind of doing what they call cat eyes, where you do like veneers and layers going out, that kind of at the butt end of the instrument, then with all the contouring, and it's like a window. And it was a real, the instrument, it was a fretless with a zebra wood fingerboard or zebra wood top and a marble wood fingerboard. So it was very stripy and cool looking. And it ended up getting a lot of people stopped just to look, because they were like, oh, wow. And I realized, that's all you need. Well, is just that stop, that sort of, what's that? And then you're in, then you it's like, oh, hi, here, this is that. And then, then they know about it. And then it's like, here, play it, like, try it out, play it. And then they play it and they're like, holy crap. And then you're like, okay, cool. Now you're in, And that's half the challenge, is just getting someone to sit there and play it.
Absolutely. And that's part of what, there's a lot of, because we get, the folks yourself and other folks that we've had in the show. It's just, it's always interesting to me to think of, you know, you'd almost think that like everything's been done, but then you can always find something that is going to just, make your thing stand out as different, even if it's something that you might not think, is that incredible, to start with. But so, again, stopping people in their tracks as they just like see like, what the hell am I looking at there? It's just really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very competitive market for sure.
Yep.
It's unfortunately for guys like me, people like Sire are setting
Sure.
the bar so low
Unrealistically
from
low,
from a pricing standpoint for what it is that they offer. And I do a lot of repair work, and I have a really good network of professional bass players that bring their instruments to me. So I've seen a lot of Sires, and I can totally respect why people choose them and the build quality for like, as far as the wood quality and stuff of what they're doing. But it makes it very difficult from someone who's trying to sell an instrument in the like I want to be able to afford to eat food range.
Right.
Right. And compete with guys who are like, well, for like $700 I can get this Sire on Musician's Friend or from CME or whatever, and like and that thing's ready to go. Like, I can buy it and I can play a gig on it that night, and I don't have to wait 6 months, and I don't have to, or I don't have to pay twice or three times as much. So
well, I mean, and that's part of it, is just like you go to make a custom instrument for somebody, and before you even have like cut a piece of wood or plan something out, I mean, just your materials are going to be more than that Sire is going to sell for. And that being said, I mean, as ready to go as they are, I mean, I can definitely tell you, I've seen, I don't know,
yeah,
a number that I couldn't count, of people who have purchased Sires, and they immediately will change the pickups or the preamp or
yeah.
the
It's like old
tuners
Mexican jazz basses. It's like the original modder's sort of, happy time. It was like the Mexican jazz bass revolution, or the Mexican P bass revolutions. I mean, those things came out in such high quantity, and like, 5-10 years later, you could buy one for like $200. And then it was like, I mean, but it was still like, some of them were total crap, but some of them were good wood and were well put together. Whoever was assembling it at the factory had a good day, and they had good wood in their hands, and sometimes that's all you needed. And then it's like you said, slap a badass on it, slap some souped up J pickups and an Audio Pre or something, and change it to ultralights. But which I get at the $200 range, but when you start talking about doing all that mod work and you're dropping $700-800, it's like you could have, plus the dude, the dude you got to pay to do all the work, and the time you got to be without the instrument while the dude that you paid to do all the work is maybe getting to it, or is maybe it's sitting backlogged in his shop while he's getting to 20 other Sires and SX basses, and
or the dude that you've paid to do the work doesn't really know how to do the work.
Right. Yeah. Which is another right. That's another risk. So,
sure is,
which I mean, I've been on the receiving end of that as well as a player, and it's terrible. So, it's a difficult. It's also like you have that, and then on the other end you have people selling instruments, in the $8,000 to $12,000 range, and just because of the mystique of the brand and the instrument, it's just like they're flying off the shelves. So it's
and I can see it with some things, especially when you see like like for instance like some alembics, and just like see the level of just book matching and all the layers going on. The fact that like every pretty much everything except probably like the tuners were made in house. For the most part, or somebody like a brand like LaFay, where like just like two brothers making like pretty much again except for the tuners, they're basically making everything. So I can and do it by hand. I can see that to a degree, and again, it's worth it if it's worth it to you ultimately. But definitely on that other end of the spectrum, it's so hard to compete with with something is actually serviceable and is in that $500 to $700 range, and that's tough, especially if the customer doesn't really see the value, and getting something more than that, I guess.
Mhm.
If that thing is what does it for them,
That's right.
that's
Yeah.
that's what does it for them.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I've seen some. I was on a little like New York jazz club tour, and a buddy of mine I was
Cool.
playing with is a drummer named Micaiah McCraven. He's a sensational drummer, and just like blew up. But he was it was the Brooklyn Bowl, I think, and they were doing a P-Funk tribute. And I forget the bass player's name. He teaches at Berkeley. He's a serious dude. He was playing like this Black Squire like piece of crap, and he sounded so
amazing.
freaking good. So it was insane. Like the funk coming off the stage that night, and like the sounds coming out of his amplifier, I was just like, holy crap. And we talked about basses a little bit after the show, and I was like, so like, what are you playing? He's like, oh, I don't know, some Squire, like some jazz bass. And I was like, oh, cool. And just that was it,
or whatever. Like,
I mean, or he just had it. Who knows?
It's awesome.
But that's another part of doing this from the performer / luthier double chair is like some of the priorities. I think I probably have gotten a little brief with customers in the past, because some of the things that customers bring up that are just intangible differences in sound and are so like focused on or hung up on, and I just have to be like you need to put this in perspective a little bit. It's like it's tough.
It could be like religion sometimes, where like I see it with like things like capacitors. For instance, like, oh, it's got to be the oil and paper capacitor. It's like it doesn't make a difference.
Yep.
I mean, it's wild.
It is wild. Yeah.
It's cool.
I mean, it's like sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I just have one question.
I always try to, my go-to. So like there's an idea that a fretted instrument can exist with extremely low action and not buzz at all. And it's very difficult to explain to people why, when they're sitting on their couch unplugged, whapping away at their instrument, and it's like buzzing and making noise, what's going on? Why is my instrument buzzing? Why, it's like, I know it's kind of buzzing really bad up here, and it's kind of buzzing here, and it's like, okay, like, first of all, your action is set pretty low. If you like that, great. This is a thing you have to get used to as a player, is like, okay. And then also, what I always tell them to do is like, go to your amp, whatever amp you take out to play with your band at rehearsal or in public, and plug your bass in and turn it up to like around the volume that you would need to play at to play with a drummer, and then tell me if you hear that buzz.
Exactly.
And it's like, I'm constantly complimented on how even my instruments play across the whole spectrum of the instrument. And that's because as a player, when I give these instruments a once over at the end, it's like I'm playing the entire range of the instrument and looking for it to be as even as possible across. And when I find something I don't like, I address it. But with that being said, it's like there's no such thing as an instrument that it can exist with like super low fretwork or super low action and not buzz a little bit when you're beating the crap out of it.
That's it. I mean, because ultimately, I mean, everybody plays a little bit different, or has a certain range of dynamics that they play within. So ultimately, the instrument has to be set up to be suitable within that range to sound the way you want the sound. I mean, like you're saying, like even like, I mean, like I know for me personally, on a fretted instrument, I like it to kind of like rattle a little bit everywhere the same, basically. Kind of like you dig in a little bit and you get that, kind of, noisy bass player, Geddy Lee, John Entwistle kind of whistly kind of thing. And that's awesome, but
if you want to play a P bass with flats and set the action super high and get that thump, then it's cool. Then you won't, I mean, like there's some super gnarly P basses out there with fretwork that's all jacked up that nobody knows is a problem because they don't play above the 12th fret and they have the action super high and flats on there. So it's like,
back in the 90s, a band I was in, we played this show, and one of the bands that played with us was Brian Beller was in the band. He was played with a band called Beer for Dolphins, and
Mike Keneally.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, he played with Zappa, and so, but they're wicked great guys. But he was playing, I think it was a Mike Lall, like
Hmm.
5 string at the time. His action was so friggin' high, and seriously, it was crazy.
Yeah,
But it didn't sound like that when he played, because
yeah,
he apparently played really hard, and it just suited the way he played. But if I had to play that, my God, I'd
yeah,
I'd have carpal tunnel by the second song or something.
yeah,
It'd be
yeah.
crazy.
It's funny. So on the, like, when you started doing the builds, I thought you said something that was really smart. You said, okay, well, nobody's going to really buy anything from a guy that's just made 3 bases, right? And
Right.
so what you were doing is saying, how do I sort of roll out or scale a few of these out so that I'm able to, have a footprint, and have some work to show and have some, build some credibility. I think a lot of people just starting out don't think about that, right?
Mm.
They don't build up a portfolio, just like you have a portfolio with your art, or if any career really, right? You have a portfolio that you can point to and you can show. Most of the people that we talk to tend to just, it's like they start out building for like friends and family, and and it turns into a thing, right? And some
Mm.
point there's like an inflection point where they say, okay, now is the time where I'm going to sort of make that leap, and I'm going to actually turn this thing into a business, and I'm going to, go down that path. And it sounded like with you, you learned how to do it, from really talented people, and said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. There wasn't, like, it didn't seem like, anyway, from your story, that there was a long period in between the time where you could, like technically carry it out, right, and make a
Hmm.
product that people could be really excited about, and then actually going and making the leap. So from a sort of a business perspective, I mean, how is that working? Like, did you go and like on the um like, did you go and like make a corporation, and did you go down that whole path like right out of the gate, or did you like as a small business owner, or how did that go? Like, how did you go
I
through?
I sort of started. I started off in a sense doing it for friends and family, but that was before I kind of developed the brand. And so to me, from the get go, because of my experience with knowing other uh, friends of mine who have started their own businesses, like how much they just pushed on PR and branding,
Yeah.
and how that is essentially what will make or break your business. And so, because of like my respect for those people's kind of like knowledge that they passed on to me in that regards, whether it was on purpose or not, I kind of went into it being like, I'm going to just drill this brand right away. And so I just started doing parts builds and advertising them as Lowdown, Lowdown, and it's like, at first it was just me buying stuff online and cobbling it together, because A, if I screwed it up, I was only out like $100,
Right.
and B, if it came out really well, I could sand the headstock, sand whatever was on it, slap a decal on it, and be like, look, it's a Lowdown bass. Um, and I think it was also helpful that I was still performing enough to where people around town were starting to see me show up to gigs with these crazy instruments, and were being like, dude, what the hell are you playing? And so then it was like, oh, I made this. And they'd be like, wow, okay, so do you have others? Like, can I check it out? And so it was, because I was a player, it was, and I had a network already.
Yeah.
Uh, it sort of spread pretty easily from a branding sense, because I was insistent upon it, and I was able to get instruments into people's hands pretty early on who were also playing them around town, and other people were seeing them play them and be like, oh, is that one of Tim's basses? Oh, cool, yeah, it's a Lowdown.
That's awesome.
And so yeah, I mean, I went into it foolishly thinking that it could be like a very successful business within the first year or two,
Right.
and it's a very, very, very labor intensive process.
Yeah.
And sort of, so coming face to face with that, and the man hours and the labor versus the money that I was able to charge for them early on, almost made me stop doing it multiple times, because I was just like, this is so stupid. Like, I am killing myself in
Yep.
this little room, pulling 6 to 8 hour days down there every day almost, and then going and playing 4 or 5 hour gigs afterwards.
Yep.
And just like, why am I doing this? And like I had some not amazing experiences early on with customers, but you know, enough positive things happened in the early first couple of years that I decided to keep going and keep funneling my own personal money into it in order to keep it surviving in the early years. So I did not get incorporated till my plan was to do it in 2020, and then it just kind of, everything just kind of pooped out. And so I did this year, I did get incorporated in 2020, but it was a weird year. This year was really this is my first year of kind of like being a proper, everything is like, you know, going through the LLC business. So whereas before I was sort of just rolling it into my self-employed musician umbrella.
Right.
So early on, you were putting your own cash in for the raw material, right? And then you're putting your, you know, massive amount of your own time, right, to be able to complete the product. And then, you know, and then you would just sort of recycle that. Is that how that would work?
Yeah, essentially, like the first batch, I just did a huge Nordstrand order, and I did like a huge hip shot order, and then whatever kind of wood and hardware or electronics were left over. I would also do a lot of just like I would do some builds for myself, and I would source those parts, you know, just like on Talkbase in the used section, or I'd find stuff where it was pretty much in brand new shape, or was in brand new shape, and it cost a little less. I was just sort of cobbling together stuff here and there and making as many instruments as I could out of it. And what would essentially happen is I would sell those instruments, recoup the initial investment, but then just direct that recoup back into buying hardware and buying pickups and buying wood for the next. And then, you know, the pot after each sort of round of instruments sold would get a little bigger and a little bigger and a little bigger until it was pretty much a self-sustaining business. I still don't really want to add up the total mana. People are often like, how long does it take to build a bass? And I'm like, well, first of all, I've never built one. I've never just like started the process and been like, I'm going to make one neck and one body. You know, it's always in a batch. And it's impossible to really break down how much, I mean, I know people that have done it, and it's a fun sort of like challenge as a business person, but like each instrument is so insanely different and so unique that there's the hours, there's no general way to be like, oh, I'm just going to charge hourly for this instrument. And that kind of goes back to the pricing thing. Like the disparity in pricing between an acceptable giggable bass and like the top end of what that range is so high. It's like, how the hell do you figure out where you fit into that as like a new luthier, as a new business person, as a new builder? And that was it. Just becomes market demand. You know, you finish a P bass, you say, hey, you go on Facebook and you say, hey guys, look at this cool P bass I built. I don't really need it because I already got all these other instruments, so I'm going to sell it. Does anyone want it for $600? And then it's crickets. And then you wait a month, and then you go back on Facebook and go, hey guys, I still got this P bass around, you know, I haven't had a lot of interest in it. How about $300? And then all of a sudden it's just like, yo dude, can I check out that P bass? And then it's gone the next day. So
I ask people this a lot. Like, I mean, how do you decide, you know, what an hour of your time is worth, you know? And like you're saying, I mean, the market kind of dictates that. So ultimately, I guess on a level, if you didn't love doing this to some degree, you would stop, you know. But obviously you have to have a love for it to keep wanting to do it, even if it's like something that isn't necessarily, you know, gonna, like, you know, have you drive around in a Bentley or something, you know.
Right. I'll tell you what, it saved my ass last year. Like, well, all the gigs dried up, everything disappeared. It was like March 15th, and I was looking at my calendar, and I'm just like, well, there goes that. And I had like tours booked, I had all sorts of cool stuff happening, and I didn't really know what was going to happen. And early on, I kind of made the decision, like, I'm gonna crank out a batch of builds. I had like, it was something like six strings and like a couple other instruments, and it was just like, it was a mountain of work. And I was just like, I'm gonna do this. This is how I'm gonna get through this. Is like I'm not gonna dwell on all the music that I'm not playing. I'm gonna just put all of my energy into this other thing and see where I come out on the other side. And it was the best year for Lowdown. I sold like 10 instruments last year.
That's awesome.
I sold all my stock. I sold, like, I had multiple instruments that I had one 6-string that I was like from the early days, and I carved the neck too thin and I made a new neck for it. It sold right away. So it was just, I did a bass, like it was a spring cleaning bass because it was, you know, around springtime and I was spending a lot of time in my shop, and I just did like a parts build with a bunch of crap I had laying around, and it sold like in a week. And it was, you know, I was like, oh, like $350, $400. I don't know. It was just like random tuners and a bridge and a P bass neck that was just laying around. And
just
like, why do I have
right?
this? Yeah. Like, why do I have this? And so I just like I had the time, you know, it was, the time was not there in 2019 because I was still playing music a lot. So time management was a thing. And when all of a sudden there was nothing else there, I was like, wow, I can really make a lot of progress. Like if I really wanted to only do this for my living, I would definitely make more money. I would probably do way more damage to myself, like physically, because I would just do it so hardcore. I would just go full into it. But I love music so much. I love performing so much. And I did get burned out on the like the professional musician lifestyle, and building gave me a boat to sort of get into, like a lifeboat to get into and sort of sail the seas for a little bit and like reflect on what's important musically to me. And then when I was ready, it's sort of like the right doors opened and the right opportunity. The things I really wanted to be doing musically started to happen because I sort of unplugged myself from the machine, and sort of did this other thing for a while. So, and I mean, I was approaching playing my instrument with a lot more passion, because it wasn't like I was just sitting around being lazy all day and like, oh, I should probably practice, but I'd rather just like watch pedal demos and, you know, like hang out on Netflix. It was like I was trapped in this other place where like I was listening to music all the time while working, but I could not be playing my instrument. And I had all these, like, I had customers waiting and I had all these demands. So when it would be time to, like, you know, go clean off the dust and put on the suit and go to the gig, I was going to the gig so excited about playing my bass. Because I wasn't doing it ever. I wasn't in a dark place of not doing it where I was wallowing in like how horrible my musical life was. I was in a very like good place. Like I have this other thing which I feel great about, and it's, my brain was growing and I was learning how to problem solve and I was developing new skills, and I was taking that energy to gigs and having such a better time playing music even when it was non-ideal situations. So it's circuitously sort of fed me back into this place of where now I have way too much on my hands, because now I'm like, oh crap, gigs are coming back. And like I'm working on a new project as a band leader, and the touring band's like, hey guys, we should probably look at doing like a fall tour because we got to get it, you know, when we can. And we have, you know, more dates coming in for next year, and bands are like, hey, we should start planning it. And I'm just like, oh man, this is going to be, I'm about to get back into the gnar. I'm about to be doing the juggling act again. So
just write down somewhere. Remember how happy you were when things were kind of more balanced. And you had, you know, only a certain amount of time to do this, only a certain amount of time to do that, and you know, it's hard not to fall into those same traps, though. That's for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, I have been charging more, and my brand has been getting much more attention and love, and so it is starting to pan out better. But for me, I've had, I mentioned Jake Sarek before, and like he's got a proper shop with employees, and like he's doing the thing. He is crushing the game, and I'm super happy for him. And I mean, I've seen what he's done, and I can really appreciate it. But I know that's not for me, and that's not the kind of business that I'm ever going to run, because of just the style of how I build and my brand. And I'm okay with that, because I want it to always sort of be something that doesn't spiral out of control where it pulls me away from all these other things that I love to do. So
it's great to know that, though. Seriously, you know, it's great to know that. I mean, in terms of your shop, actually kind of a two-parter. Before you sort of learned how to build basses and work on instruments, did you have any like woodworking experience at all before
None at
that?
all. No,
So
none
that
at
was like
all.
totally from scratch moment.
Yeah. Carl gave me the McMaster car catalog and was like, read this. And if you've ever seen that thing, it's like, it's a beast. And I didn't know what a router was. I didn't know, like I didn't have any skills whatsoever. I bought a drill press. I like went on Craigslist and bought a drill press, and like the throat was like this deep and it was like this big. And I was like, oh no, this is not going to work. And so I just ended up chucking it. And then I had to buy like a full size one. But there was sort of like when I moved from doing parts bases into making them from the ground up, the first hump was like Carl helped me sort of work through it as far as how you prepare boards for becoming instruments. And a lot of it was just, I was hanging out on the Luthier's corner on Talkbase like every night. My wife would go to sleep and I would stay in bed and just read the forums till like 2 a.m. And I was essentially, what I started doing was piecing together a process that would work based on the tools that I had and the space that I had. So
I always wondered that.
Yeah. And so being in a city, my shop life has essentially been like, I started the business in a 1-bedroom apartment in the Logan Square neighborhood, and was like sanding stuff on my back porch and like doing assembly work on a wicker tray like table thing, and like a bath towel. And it was just, I had no idea what I was doing, and it was fine. And then we bought a condo, and I was under the assumption that I could set up my shop in the guest bedroom. And I remember the first time I routed a pick guard for a customer, and it just sprayed plastic like shards all over the bed sheet and like the bed skirt. And I was like, yeah, this is not going to work. And the dust was just insane. Oh, yeah. And so then I got a space in a rehearsal studio. It was like $300 a month. It was all I could afford. And there were these just terrible punk bands that would rehearse on all sides of me when I'd be in there working, just playing so loud. This place had like no insulation. The bathroom upstairs went from like bad to just like overflowing shit out of the bathroom. I mean, the place was just so gnarly. And we were gutting our bathroom in our condo. And I remember being down in the basement of the condo building with our contractor, and there was this closet, and I like went and opened it up. I'd never gone in there before. And it was an old like super's office, like workshop. And I was like, holy crap. And I just pretty much took it over. And I like moved out of the rehearsal studio because I'm like, screw this place. This place is terrible. And I moved into there. And that's when I really started to refine my process, because I like could finally set up a shop where it was a small room. It was like a 6-foot by 10-foot room with no windows. Right. And like I had to run electricity in there. But it was where I really started to like figure out from a logistical point of view, like what is the best and quickest way I can make as many instruments as possible, and then sell them and charge as much money for them as I can. So yeah, we since sold our condo, and I had to move out of the shop, and we bought a house. And so now I am in the process of setting up a new shop space in the basement of the house. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool. How big's that space?
I have not measured it yet, but it is bigger. It is substantially bigger. It's not huge. But like I said, I don't really store a lot of lumber because I have access to a lumber yard where I can pretty much just get whatever I need when I need it. I had a guy tell me once, I was trying to order some bird's eye maple for a custom build. And he said, he's like, here, I can send you these billets and you can just cut them down. And I was like, well, I don't have a bandsaw. And he's like, what? How can you be a luthier and not have a bandsaw? Like that is the single most important thing you can have in your shop. And I wanted to send him my page and be like, hey, like, check it out. I don't have a bandsaw. Look at these instruments. Like, I'm out here doing the thing with the stuff that I got. So can you sell me the bird's eye in the dimensions I need or not? It's, there's so many ways to do every part of the process of building an instrument. It's like, I mean, the only thing there's zero substitute for is sanding. And it is the one thing that going into this, I did not give the full weight of consideration. So much sanding. Yeah. And therefore, if you own a shop, so much sand control and dust control, like, especially when that shop is in the place where you live.
So I guess, just to sort of wrap things up then, I mean,
Yeah.
one of the things that we talk to everybody about is just, the, the number of people that sort of inspire you and, sort of come alongside you and have sort of invested in you. And you've named, I don't know, I sort of lost count actually. It was like 11 or 12 people or something like that. And, it's amazing to me, like it never fails that, um, anybody we've ever anyway had on the show, but anybody successful in general has sort of had their tribe, of people that have, like again, just sort of invested in them over the years. So it's really cool just to be able to sort of see how that's happened, with you. And, I can just tell, like I can see it in your face. It's like you're appreciative of, you know, all of that and like, the time and, effort and money and, that people have put into you, right? So that you can turn around and do what you love and then, sort of do the same for other people too. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I have great customers. I have a lot of repeat customers,
Yeah.
which is all you can ask for in a business like this. It's like, those are the best kind of customers because they're really kind of like going in to support you because there are a lot of people that could build instruments for them for a comparable price point. So it's really great to have customers who support your brand and who like your instruments. And for me, selfishly, I always have sweet instruments on hand, and it's amazing to just as a player to just kind of always have cool stuff around, and to be able to share that with other musicians. And I mean, I kind of like I get it now a little bit more from the luthier's point of view of just like how good it feels to see someone playing an instrument that you made by hand and all that time and energy that went into making it for someone and seeing them play it, whether it be online in the last year or so posting videos or whether it be in person playing it and sharing that music with other people in person. But
Yeah.
it is a really, really gratifying feeling.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And to have people buy your instruments on the secondhand market, which is a fairly new thing for me, and to have people who the bass wasn't even built for pick it up and just be like, this is an incredible instrument. Like, I didn't know anything about you, but like, I'm sure glad I got my hands on this instrument, and ask questions about it and want to know about it. And so that's cool too, because it sort of forces you to readjust your perception a little bit of your business to be like, not to shortchange anyone, but to realize that the life of this instrument is not exclusively tied to this one person. And keeping that in mind when you're building, and realizing that when you enter into a partnership with an instrument and a customer, like theoretically that partnership is for the rest of your life because they should be able to play that instrument for the rest of their life. And so that kind of gives it some weight for me. And I think that's probably because of the kind of customers that I have versus being just a mass production type of operation. But that's part of why I like it so much. I think, there's some charm in there